Well, good morning, good morning. We are, again, jumping into day one of entering the promised land. So that's our topic this week. So this is the last week of our Fearless and Faithful series. I'm really enjoying this series so far. It's been really, really good. But we are closing it out this week. So I'm excited to see what's in store for us today as we jump through this story. Oh, excuse me. All right. If you are a note taker, I encourage you to take a second, get your notes ready. I am definitely a note taker. Do do do. Okay. Okay. So, if you'd like to follow along, we're going to be starting out in Numbers chapter 11 today. Good morning, Marina. Oh, look at that. Whoop whoop. Thank you for that raid. Welcome everybody who's hanging out. We are just starting in our study this morning. So we are going to start out in Numbers chapter 11. It's all the hype. Thanks for that read. Okay, so we're going to start out. Again, if you guys would like the study notes, you can do exclamation notes in the chat and it'll give you the link where you can download the notes page that I'm going to be going through. So if you like to follow along as we go for it. But I'll be going through this here. So our main point today is when God puts us in uncomfortable situations, our perspective on life changes. So that's kind of our key point today. Okay. It's funny because I feel like I've been saying a lot that these studies are getting really uncomfortable, and so it's kind of ironic that today, as we jump into the last week of this study, that we're going to be diving into uncomfortable situations. So, when God puts us in uncomfortable situations, our perspective on life changes. Okay, so, it says, share about a time when you forced yourself to do something that made you uncomfortable, and how did doing that thing change your perspective? My eyes were not on the screen for the raid. Oh, you're good. You're good. Yes, appreciate that raid for sure. So share about a time when you forced yourself to do something that made you uncomfortable. I think for me, like a really good example is absolutely this community starting the Bible studies and everything. Like, I mean, yeah, exactly, right? The streaming, man, it definitely, especially starting out, was really, really uncomfortable, and it still is sometimes, I'll be honest. But um, when you feel God calling, you gotta go for it. And it says, how did doing that thing change your perspective? Man, it's opened the door for my faith so much, and it's allowed me and all of us to kind of band together and really learn a lot of new perspectives because we get to hear from each other and we get to do the studies together. Um, so I would love to hear your guys' examples. I know I use this community a lot as examples, but I mean it's such a big thing. Let's see. I hate seeing my face on screen. That is the most recent thing. That's so funny. You're adorable. What are you talking about? You're adorable. Oh my gosh. Funny because again, that is what I was talking about on the phone. When you hear God calling, you gotta do it. Yeah, that's so funny. That tends to line up for you a lot. It's like God is talking to you. Oh my gosh. Imagine that. When I first started coming to God, I got a little bullied about my wrong beliefs. It has changed the way I talk to non-believers. Wrong beliefs as in people correcting you about like shall we say, salvational issues, or is it just like people didn't agree with your belief? You know what I'm saying? I'm curious. Oh, by the way, if you guys are not aware, so Kingdom Macadamia is Morena, by the way. I call her Morena. That's She has like 5 different names, I swear, all over the place. But Kingdom Macadamia is Morena. Just in case you didn't know. Um, yeah, so I mean, getting into uncomfortable situations, it's not something that we like to do, but again, how can those help you change your perspective? How have they helped you change your perspective? So Morena, for you with your streaming, how has that helped you change your perspective so far? Getting uncomfortable with your streams and everything that's going on there. Oh, why did it block that? Hold on. Oh, weird. I don't know why it blocked that. Oh, you said stupid. It blocked you for hostility. I got you. Let's see. My perspective has to be God's perspective. I can't look at me like I usually do. I have to look at what God is doing through me. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great perspective change. Mama Rednecks. I was Mormon, so everything was wrong. And as I would ask questions, people would talk down and act like I was the stupid one because I didn't know the correct answers. That's that's not nice. And I think that it's important for all of us to remember that, you know, as we're learning and growing, we're going to get things wrong sometimes. And that's why study is so important. There's plenty of things that, that we've studied that I'm like, oh, that's different than how I knew that, and we're always going to find that we need to have our heart open to that. And unfortunately, we're going to come across people that are not going to be graceful with us about it, and we just have to remember to have grace with ourselves and just have a heart open for the knowledge and wisdom that God wants us to have at the right time. You know what I mean? So, yeah, no, I totally get you. Really instilled in me that there's no wrong question for someone who is looking. Yeah, yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. You know, I love when people ask questions because how else are you going to learn the truth if you don't seek the truth? If you don't seek what is the true answer, what is the actual, you know, God's correct answer for this question? How are you going to find that if you don't seek it and have a heart open to seeking it? Absolutely. I know I've heard this a lot, but the only wrong questions are the ones that you don't ask, right? The only wrong questions are the ones that you don't ask. I don't think that questions are ever a bad thing, if you have a true intention for it, right? That's kind of the key is you need your heart open to actually hearing the true answer. Don't ask a question just because you're trying to prove yourself right. You know, you need to ask questions with the intention of actually learning what is true. So, I was raised Adventist with a Baptist raised father with leanings toward Jehovah's Witness. So yeah, I get that. Oh man, yeah, that could get really confusing. Goodness. Okay, great discussion. Thanks, ladies. So, have you ever done something to serve in the church that made you uncomfortable? And what did you learn from that experience? So, have you ever served in your church, like in your local church, or in, you know, um, some kind of ministry format? Have you done service that made you uncomfortable, but you were able to learn from it? I know, especially for you, Marina. I know. I know. I can say that as well, especially, doing this. That's man. What's I'll say this. How about we dive in? What is like the number one lesson you would say that you have learned? Like the most important thing that you have learned in all of your experiences. And I would say for me and Mama Rednex, I would love to hear yours as well. And anybody else who wants to chime in, please feel free, jump into the conversation. I would say for me, man, again, like this is definitely, I actually had planned on starting to serve my church right before COVID hit. And then it was really interesting because I feel like God kind of gave me the heart of service. And then the direction I thought I was going to go with it was kind of ripped away. And I was like, what? And so he opened the door for doing this again. And that definitely, man, there's all different ways that, you know, that you can see what I'm doing as service, right? And it's all just like so much of it gets really, really uncomfortable in different ways. And I think that the biggest thing that I've learned in all of that is that, again, like I think just further instilling that we have to get uncomfortable so we can grow. And so with any act of service, especially service for God, right? Like we have to get uncomfortable so that we can continue to grow in our faith and our relationship with Him. I think that's absolutely the number one thing that I've learned. And good morning, Pugman. Pooga Man. I'm sorry, I keep doing that. Pooga Man. Pooga Man. Pooga Pooga Pooga. Good morning, good morning. How are you doing this morning? I saw your prayer requests and I've been praying for you, buddy. But we are talking about uncomfortable situations and how what we've learned from uncomfortable situations and how what we have learned from serving in a way that was kind of uncomfortable, that made you uncomfortable. So if you have any input, if you'd like to chime in there and tell us your input, I would love that. Praying out loud is a big one for me. I have a strong prayer life, but I am very quiet in public. Groups like this where we take prayer requests and we share the opportunity is pushing that envelope for me. Girl, I feel you. I tell you, when I started doing this, I absolutely was the same. Well, I was probably a little more quiet. My family can definitely tell you that I was not one to pray out loud. Oh, excuse me. Not at all. It was very uncomfortable. That's actually a really good point. I was very, very uncomfortable about praying out loud and praying with people. I grew up just thinking that prayer was something that is just it's just between you and God. You don't share that. And I feel like God's really pushed me out of that quite a bit. And I'm really grateful for that though, because man, when you pray for other people and you pray with other people, it's so much more powerful um, than when you're just always doing it by yourself. Not really by yourself because you're doing it with God, obviously, right? But man, when you have a group of people praying together, man, it's very, very powerful. You never want to discount that. Okay. So, throughout the Bible, we see examples of people putting themselves in uncomfortable situations and God using that situation to strengthen their faith. So, we're not alone. There's lots of people throughout Scripture that God put them in an uncomfortable situation, and it was absolutely so that they could strengthen their faith. And I say that all the time too. I just said that a minute ago. God's going to make us uncomfortable so we can grow. We need to become stronger. We need to grow out of that comfort zone and expand that comfort zone, right? Because when you're made uncomfortable, then you eventually become comfortable with more things. You can expand that comfort zone and get stronger in your faith, get stronger in your relationship with Christ. And man, it makes a huge difference. If we refuse to put ourselves in uncomfortable situations, the Holy Spirit will do it for us because He wants to change our perspective and grow our relationship with Him. So I feel like that's so relevant to what we talked about. Was that like 2 weeks ago when we were talking about discipline, right? If we don't have the self discipline, right, then the Holy Spirit's gonna come in and do it for us. God will come in and do it for us. You know, if we don't have the self discipline, God will do the discipline because we need it, right? We need to be pushed so that we can get uncomfortable and grow and become stronger and have that deeper relationship with Him. So when you're in an uncomfortable relationship, remember that it is a growth opportunity. It's an opportunity to strengthen your faith and to strengthen your relationship with God and also to give you a new perspective. There's an opportunity to learn something. Okay? So don't forget that. So if you're in an uncomfortable, circumstance in your life right now, I challenge you to look at it as an opportunity to grow, become stronger and learn something, right? And grow closer to God in that uncomfortable state. Okay? So we're going to jump into Numbers 11. We're going to start at verse 4. Okay? But now we have lost our appetite. We never see anything but this manna. The manna was like coriander seed and looked like resin. The people went around gathering it and then ground it in a hand mill and crushed it in a mortar. They cooked it in a pot or made it into loaves, and it tasted like something made with olive oil. When the dew settled on the camp at night, the manna also came down. The rabble with them began to crave other food. And again the Israelites started wailing and said, "If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we ate in Egypt at no cost, also the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic." Pause there for a second. So I think this is really interesting right here that I had never actually noticed this before. But in this particular part, they're identifying that there are other people in this group that are not Israelites. There are other people that fled Egypt with them that are not Israelites. So they are not, they're not Christians, in other words, right? And they fled with them, and they are grumbling and complaining. And then the Israelites are kind of feeding off of that and grumbling and complaining. But there's kind of a little bit of outside influence and kind of maybe some peer pressure going on there. So they were kind of encouraged in their complaining by outsiders, right? So that's very much like, a lot of times, like we know as Christians, we know how we're supposed to, you know, um, respect God and appreciate everything He does for us and have a grateful heart. But how often do we kind of fall into grumbling and complaining and we let outside influences steer us away and kind of steer us into complaining a bit, you know? So, present day Christians are often influenced by the complaints and attitudes of non believers. And that could be dangerous territory, right? We're called to be different, we're called to be set apart. And we need to make sure that we're guarding ourselves and that we are um, remaining within the fruit of the Spirit. We're burying the fruit of the Spirit and we're not falling into the complain train, when we have a lot to be grateful for. Also, this passage is in contrast with um, a couple of previous bits in Exodus about them leaving the promised land, right? So, previous to this particular part, um, as we see at the beginning there, God just provided food for them, right? Like He's been providing food for them, and He provided manna for them for the whole 40 years of their wandering in the wilderness. So God was providing for them the whole time. And then, um, and then we see another example in Exodus where Moses put judges in place to help him lead. So there's various examples where God is providing for His people, but then we see that the people are just continuing to complain and say it's not good enough, right? They are not responding well. And even though God is providing, they're complaining. It says insatiable human lust, whatever the object of desire, will lead to a life of bondage. So as people are choosing to look back at what they call, free fish in Egypt, and they're looking at free fish given while they were in slavery. Like they were slaves. They were treated horribly. And they're saying that was better than this. That was better than God providing for us. And God is literally providing everything that they need and taking them he freed them, right? Took them out of slavery, and they're saying that the slavery was better because they're not seeing what God is actually providing for them. They're desiring things that they that they think are better, but they don't focus on what God is actually doing for them, right? So, another thing I thought was really interesting is that manna, what was the food that was provided for them, it says the manna resembled coriander seed, and like just skirting past that, I'm like, okay, like, cool. I don't really know what that means, but I thought it was interesting when I was putting the notes together. It actually describes it as oh, excuse me. Um, it was saying that it resembled coriander seed because coriander seed is actually basically like a seasoning. It adds flavor to food. So it's an indication that the manna was actually flavorful. It was actually not, something just horrible and disgusting like they were making it sound like it was. It was actually something like tasty. It was kind of the reason for describing it as coriander seed because coriander was a seasoning to add flavor. So I thought it was really interesting that they're complaining and complaining, and it's kind of pointed out that like it's not even that bad. Like God gave it some flavor, I just thought that was kind of funny. And I feel like, man, how often do we complain about something not being good enough when we're just kind of failing to realize it really isn't as bad as we think it is. And really God intends, for it to be good for us. God's plan is for it to be good for us and we see it as, oh, well, this is terrible, right? And it's a huge matter of perspective. So we need to be careful not to regard God's provisions with complaining, but rather with gratitude. God provides what we actually need, which is not always what we think we need. And we need and want are not one and the same. Salt. Yes. Yeah. So we really need to be careful that we aren't complaining about what God's doing for us, and we need to be grateful. We need it. That's absolutely a perspective change, right? When we get uncomfortable and we think, oh my gosh, this sucks. Life is terrible. I want this over here and I don't have it. Well, maybe you need a perspective change and you need to stop and recognize, oh wait, God is providing for me. I have what I need. May not have everything I want, but also that's an opportunity, I say this often, for a heart check, right? Is your heart truly desiring God, or is it desiring things of the world? And for the Israelites and the other people that were with them, they were absolutely desiring worldly things rather than desiring God. And that's what ended up stirring up all the complaining, because what they had of earthly things was not good enough. And so they weren't focusing on God, they were focusing on their wants rather than the fact that God was providing for their needs, right? Okay. Moses heard the people of every family, excuse me, wailing at the entrance of their tents. The Lord became exceedingly angry, and Moses was troubled. He asked the Lord, "Why have you brought me this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me? Did I not, or did I conceive all these people? Did I give birth to them? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant? to the land you promised on oath to their ancestors. Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep wailing to me, 'Give us meat to eat.' I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin." Yeah, he is fed up, just throwing his hands up in frustration. Yes. Um, yes, he is. And again, though, I will point out that, I feel like I looked at this story with a totally different perspective than I have before. Um, Moses is he's kind of lacking a little bit of trust in God too. It's like the complaining is impacting him. He is he is absolutely right. There goes the table flip moment. He's getting fed up, and God is fed up too, right? I think that's important to recognize, is that God and Moses are both like, come on, right? Like, what on earth is happening here? Um, and I think that it's really, really important to recognize that, though, that Moses was frustrated, and so was God. And the same happens when we complain. When we complain, it affects the people around us. When we get whiny and complaining and ungrateful, that is contagious. That absolutely influences everybody around us as well, and that's really important to recognize, right? If we let others influence us in any way, we just have to be careful to guard that. We have to be careful how we let people influence us, because Moses, this is kind of the beginning of him. He starts from here, he starts to kind of rebel a bit. And I think that that's interesting, because Moses is one of like the most highly esteemed biblical characters that everybody knows about, everybody talks about, everybody, you know, I'll say this, thinks they know about. And then when you really read into it, Moses actually ended up rebelling. And this is kind of the start of it, right? You have the outsiders, the non-Christians, the non-believers, they tagged along with the Israelites, and then it indicates that the non-Israelites, whoever they were, decided to complain. Like, they were complaining, they were unhappy. They didn't have a relationship with God, right? They didn't understand, they didn't have faith. Um, so okay, we can kind of look at that and say, well, that's expected, right? They didn't have faith in God. So we can't hold them to the same standard. But then the Israelites are feeding off of that. They're being influenced by the complaining. And it's just a wave, right? It's a trickle, it's a domino effect. They're being impacted. And then now Moses, their leader, is being impacted. Complaining is a very powerful thing. It is a very powerful thing, right? But then what did Moses do? In this moment, what did Moses do? Moses came to God. He went to God and he told God that he was overwhelmed. And he did it in a way that wasn't necessarily disrespectful. He didn't like point the finger at God, and like he was genuinely asking questions. Like, God, if you genuinely, if you really want me to, you know, to do this, if this is how, it's going to continue to be, just kill me, right? But he wasn't saying, oh God, you're terrible. Oh God, you're hateful. He wasn't disrespecting God. He was just opening his heart up and being honest with him, right? But at the same time recognize that he was on that edge of rebellion. I think that's really important to recognize, because a lot of times we'll look at the complaining that happens in scripture and we're like, see, they complain, right? And we're like, it's okay. They complained. Be careful with that. Be careful with that, because not all complaining can be fruitful, right? Be careful that your complaining doesn't lead to rebellion against God. Remember who he is and what he does for you. Complaining can be fruitful when you seek God-driven change. So if you are pouring your heart out to God with the intention to seek change, not just, oh, this is so terrible. Everything is rotten and I have, and really have no desire to change the situation or help the situation. That's not fruitful. When you're just, I give up. I give up. This just sucks and I don't want any part of it anymore and I'm just not going to do what I should do. But if you are pouring your heart out and complaining with the intention of, hey, I need to figure out how to change this, right? There's a big difference. Big, big difference. Okay? And Luke 6:45, the good man out of the good treasure of his heart brings forth what is good, and the evil man out of the evil treasure brings forth what is evil, for his mouth speaks from that which fills his heart. Oh, excuse me. What? Mama Rednecks, what? I'm so confused. Yeah, absolutely. That's funny that you post that one, Miranda, because that was one of the verses that we went through in our sermon yesterday. That's so funny. But yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. My mentor and mom too was talking about that this morning about her Jessamine moment this week. I have found if the complaining doesn't lead to prayer, then you're just sowing discord. Exactly. Oh, I see what you said. That's funny. It triggered. Yes, absolutely. Exactly, exactly, exactly. If your complaining is not leading you to doing something better, doing something different, seeking God out and how he can help you change the situation, right? Whatever needs to happen there. If it's just complaining just to complain and just whine and just, oh, this is dumb, this is terrible, my life sucks, that's not going to help you. And that's just going to be contagious and it's going to affect everybody that's around you. Complaining with the intent to change can be fruitful, right? Remain steadfast in your service to the Lord and trust his plan. It's like Moses was struggling there with that, but we have to remain steadfast in your service to the Lord and trust his plan. Trust that even when it's uncomfortable, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it feels like there's a lot to complain about, remember that he has a plan and we need to trust it and not complain about his plan. We need to trust his plan. Oh, thank you so much. Morena, thank you so much for that. Let me update this before I forget. Seriously, thank you. You're good. You're good. No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think that it's really, really important also to recognize that if we reject God's provisions, we're rejecting the provider, right? If we reject and complain about what he is providing for us, we're rejecting and complaining about him, right? And that's kind of ouchy. Like that's we have oh man. I think that's too easy to miss because he provides what we need. What we need, what he knows. He who knows everything has, all knowledge, all wisdom, all power through all of time for all of us, right? He knows what we need. And if he's providing what we need and we're complaining about what he's providing for us, then absolutely we are rejecting him and what he's doing for us and we're lacking faith in him. So be careful of what you complain about. I'm guilty. I'm guilty. Got to be careful what you complain about. Okay, we're going to jump to the next section here. The Lord said to Moses, "Bring me 70 of Israel's elders, who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting, that they may stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you and put it on them. Ow. They will share the burden of the people with you, so that you will not have to carry it alone. Tell the people, consecrate yourselves in preparation for tomorrow, when you will eat meat. The Lord heard you when you wailed. If only we had meat to eat, we were better off in Egypt. Now the Lord will give you meat, and you will eat it." So I thought it was interesting that um, I was reading some of the notes here. Let me find it. I was reading some of the notes this morning, and it said, "The complaint of the people had so angered the Lord that he determined to cause them to have an overabundance of meat. The Israelites had rejected the manna, describing it as something that dried their being. God was going to give them so much meat that it would become sickening to them, causing them to realize what a great gift manna really was. The issue here was not really meat and manna, but whether the people would serve God as their God. To reject the provision was in essence to reject the provider." Right? So I thought that was kind of funny that I've always taken that as, oh, okay, he gave them what they were asking for, but really it was kind of like, all right, you want it, you think you want it. It's kind of like a be careful what you wish for, kind of experience. And he ended up giving them so much meat that it would have made them sick, right? Because it was like, I gave you what you actually needed. Now you think you need this, and this isn't going to help you. This isn't going to be good for you, right? Kind of like proving, like, I'm the one that knows what to do. I'm the one that knows what's good for you. You don't, right? Like, that's interesting. I never really thought of it like that. But then God also told Moses to um, bring up 70 elders, and he was going to bless them with the Holy Spirit as well. So now he heard Moses, right? And he gave Moses help. I think that's really important for us to recognize is when we when we recognize, God, this is more than I can handle on my own, and we really genuinely bring that to God and not in like a, I feel like it's important not to, oh, I give up and I don't trust you and this is terrible. But when we genuinely are like, God, I can't do this on my own. So whatever help I need, please provide it, right? And he will. He absolutely will. And we have people, all of us, God will bring people in our lives to help us and to fellowship with, to have relationship with, because we need that. And for Moses here, God gave him 70 elders to help him with leading these people, right? And then I also thought that it was interesting. Let's see. Possession of the Spirit of God that had been exclusively on Moses would now be distributed to the 70 elders, giving them a spiritual dimension that would set them apart from the administrative and judicial appointees that we see in Exodus. This enabled the elders and officers to carry out the tasks of teaching, judging, and leading the Israelites through the wilderness. Later, Balaam also received the spirit of prophecy from God. So that was interesting, right? Right. It reminds me of a way to get a kid to understand something as very, yeah, oh my gosh. Morena, for real. Oh man. And then it mentions consecrating yourself. Another way to say that is like purifying yourself. And that, before, in that time, before anybody was allowed to come before God, they had to be clean, right? And so that was welcome. Thanks for joining us. Um, so that was absolutely, them like basically like bathing and being clean before they come to God. They needed to be clean enough to be in his presence. So it also mentioned in this passage that we just read that God recognized that the Israelites were saying, if only we had meat to eat, we were better off in Egypt. So were the Israelites' memories of their time in Egypt accurate? Did they remember what it was like in Egypt? Um, honestly? Or was their memory of that time kind of skewed at this point? I'd say it was pretty skewed, right? They were saying they were better off in Egypt, where they were brutally treated as slaves, and they're saying that that was better than being free and God providing for all their needs, right? Hindsight brings rose colored glasses that distort our past experiences. Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh. Ow. Oh, excuse me. Ow. Yeah. No, absolutely. Um, and yeah, and that kind of goes into the next why or why not. Why why was it not accurate, right? They were so focused on what they wanted and what they thought they needed. And they saw, oh, well, back in Egypt, we had meat, right? That we didn't have to pay for or work, well, they worked for it, but, which is also interesting. They call it free, but they were literally slaves. Like, they had to literally work as slaves in order to earn free fish, right? Like, and so now they're like, well, I got free fish, I got free meat, like that's better than all this manna that we have to eat. But they're missing the point, right? Because they are so like one of the earlier notes said, um, where is it? Insatiable human lust, whatever the object of desire, will lead to a life of bondage. So they were so lustful of meat that they thought being slaves would have been better. They looked back and thought being a slave was better than being provided for by God and being freed by God. Isn't that interesting? But how often do we do things like that? Oh, well, life was so much better when I had this, but like was it really? Life was so much better when I wasn't following, when I wasn't following God, but was it really? We really have to think about that, you know? What had God done for the Israelites up to this point, and how might remembering those things have changed their perspective? What are some of the things that you know that God did for the Israelites up to this point? Remember how we used to just go places whenever before we had kids? Yeah, no, we were still homebodies. Oh man, for real. Like I hear a lot, oh, life was so different before. Yeah, it was, but like, was it better? Like, I don't know, man. I'm pretty chill with my family. I'm happy with my family life. Life is a lot better with my family than it was than it was before. That's a good example though. So what had God done for the Israelites up to this point? Okay. The Israelites were not living in luxury in Egypt. They were living under brutal slavery, and Pharaoh had made their lives miserable. God had delivered them out of the hand of Pharaoh through 10 plagues and miraculously led them out of Egypt through the parting of the Red Sea. Right? He literally parted the sea for them. And I love to point this out. He literally inflicted 10 plagues in Egypt to get Pharaoh to let them go. I'd say that's a pretty big deal, right? Um, God had also cared for their spiritual health by giving Moses the law on Mount Sinai, right? So he gave them instructions. He gave them the law, right? God's law, commandments. He gave them this is how you need to live, right? So he cared for their spiritual health in that. I love that identification. When the Israelites grew hungry, God was gracious and gave them manna from heaven. Like he literally spawned food out of the ground. Like he literally just like, bloop, here's a bunch of food just out of nowhere, right? Or from heaven as as it states, but like literally like poof, there's food, right? What? Right? God did everything for his ungrateful bratty kids. Exactly. Exactly. And then, despite the many ways God had provided for them, the Israelites were not content and had convinced themselves that they were better off when they were in slavery in Egypt. In other words, yeah, in other words, they still treated him like garbage. Exactly. They were not content. They were not satisfied with God and his provisions. They didn't trust that God was providing what they needed. They were they were entitled bratty kids, exactly. Yes. But again, how often do we act like that? How often do we treat God that way? God, why do I not have this? Why is this not happening for me? Well, are you really paying attention to what he is doing for you? Or are you missing what he's doing for you because you're so focused on what you're lusting after? Just like the Israelites. You know? I think we're guilty. We're all guilty of that sometimes. And then in this last passage that we read, how did Moses respond to the Israelites' complaint? So that was in that's where he was like, ow. He's like, um did I give birth to them? Did I conceive all these people? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant? So he's basically like, I'm a wet nurse. Like I didn't give birth to these people. And then he says, is this how you are going to treat me? Please go ahead. If this is how you're going to treat me, please go ahead and kill me if I have found favor in your eyes, and do not let me face my own ruin. Like he's just like freaking out, and he's miserable, and he's just totally getting torn apart by the people, right? And then how did God respond to Moses? And why is it significant that he put the elders in place? So we see God God then says, "Okay, I'll give them meat, and okay, I'll give you help." Right? And that's really important. Even if his reason might have been, oh, well, I'm going to prove to them that they don't really need this, right? But still, he's taking care of his people and he's giving Moses help. So I think that that's really good. It's a good point to show that God listens when we complain. God listens when we lift it up to him, and that's also important too to recognize that when we bring our complaints to God, he's going to listen. And if we don't have our heart open to actually receiving a true answer, right? Actually experiencing change, actually doing something positive and necessary about the complaining and the thing that we're complaining about, then we're going to miss what he tries to do for us in response, right? God hears our complaints. He hears us when we reach out to him. And he absolutely will help us in the ways that he knows are right? In the ways that he determines he will help us. But we need to have the heart open to actually experiencing that response, hearing that response, and doing something with it, right? How do you tend to respond when people complain to you about petty things? While you give me that answer, I'm going to read this. The Holy Spirit rarely dwelt in people in the Old Testament. Only those who were specifically chosen to be used by God or to enter into a special relationship with God were given the Spirit. This can be seen in the life of Moses, who spoke to God face to face, just as a man speaks with his friend. As you see in Exodus 33:11. And that same Spirit was given to 70 elders, and it signified a special and intimate relationship with God. Also important to note that now, when we enter into that relationship with God, we receive His Spirit. So we get to have that special and intimate relationship with God, right? So, how though do we tend to respond when people complain about petty things? Is it annoying? Are we nice about our response? Do we end up complaining ourselves? Do we judge them? You know, what do we tend to do? I feel like that's a tough one. Nobody wants to admit. Nobody wants to admit what they do. I'm not always the most graceful about it. I think that's an area that I struggle with having patience and grace for sure. Um, and I have a tendency to just try to remember myself and remind others to just trust God. Give it to God, trust God, bring it to God, like before anybody else, right? That's what we need to do. Give it to God, bring it to God before anybody else, right? I don't know, I'm always trying to be nicer to others than people have been to me, but it doesn't always work. Yeah, dude. It's important to remember too that we're all struggling in our own ways, and there's absolutely things that we all need to work on, right? Like nobody's perfect. There's always going to be things that we need to do better. And that's probably an area that most people need to learn to respond better. Hey Johnny, good morning. Try to be nice, but in the back of my head I can get annoyed or angry. Yes. Yeah. I think when you get to the point where you can like filter, at least you start to filter better what comes out of your mouth, you've made a big step there. Like that's a huge step in itself. Being able to filter what comes out of your mouth. The next step is filtering what's in your head, cuz that's a little harder, right? That's maybe a lot harder. But being able to filter what comes out of your mouth, you know, but man, just give it to God. I think that's when we hear people complaining about petty things, or complaining in general, right? Give it to God and guard your heart. Because as we see through this story too, it's contagious. But it's your decision whether you let that influence you or not. So don't let other people's complaining affect you negatively. Use that as a reminder, as an opportunity to remind them, and as a reminder to yourself. Seek God in that, and seek whatever God needs you to do in that. And honestly seek true change. Don't complain just for the sake of complaining. Don't complain just to hear your own voice. Don't complain just to chime in and have your 2 cents be heard, right? Don't complain just to argue. Don't complain just to fit in, right? if you're complaining, make sure that you're doing it for a positive purpose to influence some kind of change either in you or help somebody else. Complaining should never be done because when you complain just to complain, you're basically gossiping, right? Especially if you complain about somebody else's complaining or about somebody else in general, right? Then you're gossiping. And we definitely don't want to do that. At times I have complained myself. Oh, it's prayer time. Hold on one second. Let me read these. Then we're going to pray. And at times I have complained myself because of other people complaining. Definitely need to work on that. Yeah, absolutely. Guilty, for sure. And I'm working on that too. It's tough. But it needs to be intentional. You have to be intentionally guarding your heart, guarding your words, guarding your mind, and making sure that when you hear the complaining or you start to feel the complaining going on yourself, immediately guard yourself. Give it to God. Seek God out in that immediately. Don't bring it to somebody else because then you're just gossiping, right? Been here for a while just soaking it all in. Yeah. I had a feeling with you chiming in all of a sudden. Okay, guys, we're going to pray really quick and then we'll keep going. And that's perfect because I think we're at the point right after this. We're going to hop into Acts chapter 6. So we'll finish up this after our prayer and then we'll go into Acts chapter 6. Yeah, absolutely. Give me your prayer request, dude. What be your prayer? Thank you. And if anybody else here has a prayer request, please feel free to share. I'll give you a second for that. I am in the voice channel if anybody wants to chime in, get in there at all. That's totally cool. Stays on fire, maybe feels. Oh no. Oh my goodness. Hey, Jordan. Oh my goodness. So nice to see you here. I have a feeling you have the day off today. State is on fire. Dude, Johnny, that's absolutely for sure. Let's pray for that. Keep me updated too. Are you like really close to that? Are you. Ah, California. Yeah, dude. That's. Man. California gets hit hard at least once a year. That's awful. I just can't even understand it. I'm blown away at like all of the natural disasters that are happening. Like it feels like 10 times more than usual like through the summer and everything. Basically since COVID hit. It's like all these natural disasters are like 10 times more than they were before. I just don't even understand. It's crazy. Mom too in a far away land doing military work. Yes, yes. Oh, thank you for the follow. Hello, hello, welcome. We are taking prayer requests right now. If I can pray for you at all, if we as a community can pray for you at all, taking prayer requests and then we're going to pray and then we're going to jump back into our study. So please feel free to share if there's anything at all that we can pray for you. Just writing these down because I like to I have a peanut memory, so I try to write them down so that I can be praying for you guys more consistently, more constantly. Hubs has thrown his back. Oh man, Mama Rednecks, for real? Both of you. Goodness gracious. That is nuts. In the heat of the household, when daddy doesn't do it, it doesn't get done. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I know. And I know a little bit from what you've told me. Woof, that is not good. Definitely will lift both of you guys up. My friend is still holding firm to the faith. She's still recovering from her surgery, waiting for chemo. My godson-in-law has shingles in his head? What? How? I'm so confused. I'm glad. Thank you for the update on your friend. Um, I am so glad to hear that she is hanging on. Okay. And my bro-in-law's lungs from the COVID still testing positive. Oh my goodness. Yes, thank you for all the updates and prayer requests. Um, so is he your brother-in-law? Is he doing okay though? And the last time you said that he seemed to be getting better, but he's still testing positive. And that's crazy. It's been a few weeks now. That's a long run, it sounds like. Okay, if there's any other prayer requests, please let me know. We're going to pray, and then we'll dive back into the study. Okay. Again, feel free to keep sharing your prayer requests. I'll check up before we close out prayer, but we'll go ahead and pray here. Feels okay other than his lungs feeling like blankets and pain. Oh, that's awful. Well, I'm glad he's feeling okay other than that. That's not fun though. Okay. Let's go ahead and pray, guys. Oh, excuse me. I don't know where that came from. Dear Lord, thank you so much, God, for our time together this morning with you, with each other, diving into your word. And Lord, I lift all of us up to you this morning. Oh, ow, excuse me. I lift all of you up, or I lift all of us up to you this morning and seek you out. Please, God, be with us and help us in just the chaos that our world is feeling right now. Help us to be transformed by you every day in the ways that you call us to. Help us to really, oh, ouch. Help us to really seek you out and really feel your presence with us. Feel the change that you are pushing on us, that you are influencing in us, and help us to accept those nudges, accept your discipline, your correction, and help us to really focus on you even deeper every single day, and really go out into the world and be fueled by you, be fed by you, and overflow with you, so that we are flowing your life and your truth and your love into the lives of others around us as well. Help us to be the change that this world needs for your sake. Help us to do the work that you call us to do. God, I know that you don't need us, but I thank you that you want us and that you want to use us for your kingdom and your glory. And help us to all have a heart for being used by you in the ways that you call us to. Help us to have hearts of obedience to you. And Lord, I want to lift up Mama Rednecks and her back pain, and now her husband throwing out his back in their household. And Lord, I just pray that they find relief, that they find comfort and healing there. And Lord, just be with them, be with their family, and just help them in whatever ways they need right now. Give them peace and give them rest. And Lord, be with Johnny as he is in a very hot, literally, zone, and help him to stay safe, and help him um, to remain at peace with you, trusting your plan, trusting your will, and trusting your guidance as you tell him to, however you tell him to handle whatever it is he needs to handle in this. God, I just thank you so much that you are there working for them. And I just pray that you continue to be there with him and guide him and keep all these people safe. Help them to recover as they're just every year, just houses upon houses being lost, and everybody just their lives are just crumbling or burning around them. And Lord, just help them to seek you in that. God, help Johnny to be whatever it is that you need him to be in his community, and just help all of these people to come to you, to seek you. And God, I just ask that you just that you help them and protect them and provide for them, even while they may be grumbling and groaning like the Israelites were in the wilderness. Lord, I just lift them up to you, and for their sake, I just ask that you forgive them, and that you have mercy on them, and that you soften their hearts to you. Help them to hear you, help them to see you and feel you, and Lord, help them to come to you in whatever way we can be helping with that. Lord, I just pray that you make it known to us. And God, be with Morena and her family and her friends and everything that's going on there. Be with her mom too, and the military work that she is doing, and bless her in that. Keep her safe in that, and guide her in your way and your will, and continue to be with her friend who is battling cancer. And God, I just thank you so much that she is holding on to you. And God, I just continue to pray that you just help her to keep hanging on to you, and guide her in her very painful journey right now, and help her to really just be continuing to seek you out and shining your light to those around her as well, and helping others to come to you through her faith in her struggle right now. And Lord, be with Miranda's brother-in-law as well as he is battling COVID, and help him to recover and heal and get back to life and his family and everything in your will as well. And just help him to hold on to you and remain faithful to you, whatever that relationship looks like currently. God, I just pray that he seek you out harder, and really really know that you're there with him. And Lord, I just lift us all up as we finish our study today, and I just thank you so much for this study, and so much for the reminders that we need, the lessons that we need, and things that are not easy for us to swallow. But Lord, I thank you that you give us what we need even when we don't see it, and you give us what you answer our prayers in the ways that you know are right and best for us, even when we can't see it. And God, I just pray that you give us hearts that are open for you, and help us to not grow whiny and ungrateful like the Israelites in the wilderness. And that we be set apart, that you help us to remember that we are called to be set apart, that we are called to be different. We are called to do your work and your will, and really trust you and focus on you. And Lord, just help us to remember that. Help us to remind each other of that, and help us to do better every single day. Lord, I just thank you so, so much for all that you do, all that you provide for us. And Lord, I just pray that we see all of it, and we have grateful hearts for you. Just thank you so much, God, for everything that you're doing, everything that's ahead of us that we can't see. Lord, I just thank you for all of it, because I know that you have a plan, even when we cannot see it. Lord, just thank you so much for loving us enough to provide everything that we need. In your name, amen. Goodness gracious, y'all were blowing things up while we were praying. Goodness. Thank you so much, APK, for that sub. Thank you so much. Goodness. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Chat is on follower only mode in case you didn't. Oh, my mods probably took care of that. We have a tendency to get lots of trolls in here, so I trust them to handle that business. Um, yes. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, what is happening? Thank you so much. Goodness. Well, welcome everybody who just came in, who has just followed. I hope you guys are doing well. We are like sort of halfway through our study today. I feel like today's kind of a long study. Um, we are diving into our topic of entering the promised land. Um, Let me track those. Thank you so much for those bits, for real. That is so generous. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much for the sub. Oh, which I also need to update. The counters are never accurate, so I do it manually. Don't mind me. Y'all are wonderful. Thank you so much. Um, okay. So we're gonna keep on going. We had a few things left here in Numbers. So we're in Numbers chapter 11. Then we're gonna hop over to Acts chapter 6. Um, so we've been talking about how the Israelites are wandering through the wilderness, right? They were led out of Egypt. They were freed from Egypt by God, by the grace of God, and many miracles that He performed to make that happen, right? And they are extremely whiny and ungrateful. And we've been talking about how we need to be careful. Excuse me. We need to be careful that we don't fall into that. That we don't fall into being ungrateful and being whiny and complaining and gossiping and being just kind of bratty towards God. And we need to recognize that He's constantly working for us. He's constantly providing for us. He's constantly giving us what we need, even when it's not what we think we need, it's what God knows we actually need. And we need to be mindful and we need to see those things. We need to recognize what God is doing in our lives and what He is providing for us all the time. Um, so that's what we've been going into so far, and we're going to continue on that. It says, it is difficult to put up with the petty complaints of others, and it is even harder to bless such people. But it is important to remember that the Israelites did not deserve to be delivered out of Egypt, given bread to eat, or any of the many blessings God had given them. Hello, hello. Good morning and welcome. Um, God does not bless us because we deserve it. He blesses us because He is good. God blessing the Israelites with meat, even though their complaints reflected a lack of appreciation for God, is a picture of the gospel of Jesus Christ. God sent Jesus to die for our sins, even though we did not deserve it. God demonstrated His love for us by sending Jesus to die for us while we were still sinners. One of the primary ways God calls us to step out of our comfort zones is through serving others. No matter how uncomfortable service may be from time to time, it is an act of worship and your life will be changed through the process. So, man, I love that I love that this points out that this story is absolutely a reflection of, we don't deserve what we have. And I feel like for a lot of us that definitely can hit the pride, right? Like you don't like to hear, and I don't always like to hear, you don't deserve what you have. But God gives it to you anyway, right? None of us can earn what we have. We may think that we earn it cuz if you work and you earn your paycheck, well, God made that option for you. He gave you that option. He gave you that opportunity. God is providing that for you. And He is blessing you with that, right? We have what we have because God made it so. And we don't earn any of it. We can't earn any of it. We don't deserve any of it. But God wants a relationship with us and wants us to come to Him, wants us to choose Him, right? And He made a way for us to do that. And I love that it points out that this story is absolutely a great example of that the Israelites did not deserve it, but God gave it to them anyway, right? And it's a very, very good picture of the gospel of Jesus that God sent Jesus to die for us, even though we didn't earn it. We couldn't possibly earn that, deserve that salvation, but God did it for us anyway, right? So no matter how uncomfortable it gets to serve God, no matter how uncomfortable your calling is, step outside that comfort zone and worship God through your service. Praise Him, even when life is uncomfortable, even when your circumstances are uncomfortable. Praise God for everything that He's doing for you. You don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. But he's doing it anyway, and he absolutely deserves our praise for that. Absolutely. So we're going to hop over to Acts chapter 6. Okay. Short little snip here. In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food. So the 12 gathered all the disciples together and said, "It would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. Brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and will give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word." This proposal pleased the whole group. Oh my gosh, excuse me. They chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Holy Spirit, also Philip, Prochorus, I'm going to butcher all of these, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch, a convert to Judaism. They presented these men to the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them. So the word of God spread. The number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith. So this passage is really interesting. I feel like there's so many passages that are just like so easy to kind of glaze over. This is probably one of them. But here's some important points here. The distinction between the Hellenistic and Hebraic, oh my gosh, Jews probably refers to their respective languages. Many Jews whose primary language was Greek were converted to Christianity. Needy Hellenistic believers felt they had been neglected in the early church's charity distribution. This imbalance may have arisen due simply to the logistical challenge caused by the rapid addition of Hellenistic Jewish Christians. The existing church structure proved unable to meet the growing demands. It was time for change. And so it was recognized, right? The change was needed. And it's really, really important. There's a part in here that at first glance it just sounds like the apostles are just kind of like, oh, that's, I shouldn't be responsible for that. But actually, I would challenge you to see that differently. The distinction between those responsible for preaching and those responsible for distribution of food marks the beginning of functional distinction of roles and responsibilities in the early church. So that's really saying we have our calling and our role here. This is what we are called to do. This is not what we are called to do. We need to find somebody that is suitable and called to do this. It's not saying, oh, that's not important enough. It's saying, I recognize my responsibility is over here, and this needs to fall to somebody else, right? So the apostles believed prayer and preaching were their primary duties. That's what God had called them to do, okay? Each of the 7 men filled a position that later came to be reserved for deacons. Therefore, these men were the first Christian deacons. They were responsible for the practical needs of the congregation. I think that is really, really important. Yes, thank you, Miranda. Absolutely. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, right? When we were talking about callings. Ow. Is that everybody has their specific things that they're called to, but not everybody is responsible for everything. And so this isn't like, oh, that's petty work, like I shouldn't be doing that. Which I've heard a lot that that's how a lot of people interpret that, but I would challenge you to look at that as not everybody is meant to do all the things, right? Some things are supposed to be done by somebody else. You have your calling, they have theirs. Ow. Ugh, oh my goodness. And you posted verse 11 and 12. There we go. We'll read these. And he gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ. Absolutely. Exactly. Each person is going to have their designated role that God is going to place them in. And then Romans 12:4, for just as we have many members in one body and all the members do not have the same function. Exactly. So the apostles were merely recognizing this isn't something that we're supposed to be doing, right? And there's different areas for me that, with leading this community and everything, I've had to realize, okay, God is telling me I need to get somebody else to do this because that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. It needs to be done, but it's not supposed to be done by me, right? And I think that's really important for us to remember is that we are not responsible. We're not supposed to be responsible for everything, right? God is going to give you your task, your role, your responsibilities, but you need to not do more than what God is telling you to do, and you need to leave that for the right person that God's going to call into that, right? There are more verses for that one, but I didn't want to flood the chat. You're good. You're good. No, those are great. Those are great. And I also think that it was really important to point out that these 7 men that were put in place here um, were basically like kind of unofficially the first Christian deacons, which are very, very important roles in any church, right? And it kind of, to us, like it kind of sounds like, oh, that's kind of unglamorous, but you know what? That's actually really, really important. So it wasn't discounting them, it was just saying this is a different responsibility. This is outside of our role, right? And that's important for all of us to remember. Because who here is somebody who likes to just do it all, or maybe not likes, but tries to do it all, thinking that, oh, well, kind of the mentality of, well, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself. Right? Right? I'm totally guilty a lot of the time. And that's something that God's been teaching me to let go and let others fulfill certain things, certain roles, certain tasks that I'm not meant to do all by myself. Right? And we all need that. We all need to recognize that. So the apostles were careful to recognize and not abandon their God given calling in the church and sought help for the needs of the people that were outside their calling. They recognized, hey, that's not for me to do. Somebody else needs to do that. Not because it wasn't good enough for them, but because there needs to be an appropriate allocation of tasks, of responsibilities, of roles, right? You can only do what you can do and nothing more. Exactly. Do what God calls you to do. Stop trying to do more than that. Yup. Okay. So it says Stephen and 6 others were selected as the first deacons. They were set apart for service by prayer and the laying on of hands by the apostles. The laying on of hands occurs in several contexts in Acts. Here, as in 13:3, it indicated the church's recognition that God had called these people to a particular ministry. So the laying on of hands was recognizing that these individuals were called by God to serve in that area, right? That's important. And then it goes on. In the very last verse, it says, the number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith. So this boldness, right, drove growth in the number of the disciples in the early church. Even a large group of priests became followers of Christ. Luke did not specify who the priests were, but they were probably those who performed duties in connection with worship at the temple. This put them in a good position to hear the apostles preach on a regular basis. It's important to note that men and women became disciples, living in unashamed, bold submission to Christ's lordship, going out into the world to share the gospel. So because there was an appropriate allocation of roles and responsibility, there was more people brought in to the service of the church, right? They were able to bring even more people in to that relationship with Christ. When you try to do it all yourself, you're not going to be able to reach all of the people that expanding could reach, right? When you just take all that responsibility for yourself, you don't know everybody, right? Like you need to let these other tasks, these other responsibilities fall to the people that God calls for it, and not try to do it all yourself, because then you're taking opportunities away from other people, and you might be taking an opportunity to convert somebody away if you're trying to tackle it all yourself. There's some consequences to just trying to take it all on yourself, you know. Stephen was also not just a fulfillment of the role, it was just one of his attributes. Yes, we may be qualified for something else, but God wants to use us in a specific way that may not be one of our finest points. Absolutely. That's an incredibly important thing to note. Absolutely. And even something that maybe you don't feel particularly strong in, maybe God's going to be like, we're going to beef that up, right? I'm going to use that. We're going to beef it up. We're going to beef you up, and you're going to grow in that. And it's going to become one of your primary things, right? Absolutely. Okay. So what was the complaint that was brought before the 12, and why did the 12 refuse to deal with complaints themselves? We just talked about that, right? Like um, the people didn't feel like everybody was being tended to the way that they should have, right? And so they recognize they were not the right role for that care. If the 12 were to take on this task of overseeing the distribution of food equally to the Hebrew and Hellenistic widows, they would have had to spend less time preaching the word. See? Thus, they chose 7 men who had a good reputation, were full of the Spirit, and were wise to take on the task so that the ministry of the word would not be hindered. Amen to that, man. Okay. Given that these 7 men were chosen to serve the widows rather than volunteering, they were chosen rather than volunteered. How do you think serving in this capacity changed their perspective? So how do you think it would have changed their perspective to be chosen rather than volunteer? Is there something that you've been chosen for rather than you've been kind of voluntold maybe instead of volunteered? Maybe that's kind of changed your perspective on that. I think since God kind of called me to do this, I've gained a much deeper appreciation for church leaders and ministry leaders. Like, it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot of work, and a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility. I think there would be a deeper sense of urgency. Yeah, that's a good point. That's absolutely a good point. God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise, and God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame the things which are strong, and the base things of the world and the despised God has chosen the things that are not, so that he may nullify the things that are, so that no man may boast before God. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great verse. Um and then what was the result of these men taking over the distribution of food to the widows? So imagine feeling like I was called because I was one of those other things and not because my strength or my smarts. Yeah, absolutely. That's very, very true. Got to have humility for sure. That's a really great point. Heart check. If you feel called to do something, you better check your heart and make sure that you're not letting your pride taint it, contaminate how you feel about it and how you present yourself in that. Make sure that you're staying humble and you're recognizing, well, maybe it's not because you're the best. Maybe it's because that's something that God wants to work on in you, you know? Absolutely. Absolutely. So while there was nothing particularly impressive or fancy about the ministry that these 7 men took on, it freed up the 12 to preach the gospel and the result was incredible as disciples in Jerusalem multiplied greatly. While such acts of service may not seem all that impressive to us, in the eyes of God, they are precious. So no matter what it is that you're called to do, never discount your the impact that it can have. Never impact the importance of whatever role God has called you to. Wherever you go, wherever God calls you to work, God calls you to work for Him. You're working for His glory, His kingdom. And He doesn't want you to complain. He wants you to trust Him. He wants you to trust that He has placed you there for a reason. Just like He took the Israelites out of Egypt, brought them into the wilderness for a reason. He provided for everything that they needed. And then we see people are going to be appointed in the right places at the right time according to God's plan. Because that's where He knows they need to be, right? To carry out His plan and His will. And we need to remain humble and not get pride struck or complain. And there's a lot of pride that can happen with complaining too, right? Don't feel like you are too good for the job that God has called you to. Don't fall into complaining about what God has called you to do. Trust Him, trust His plan, and recognize that every single job is important. Every single job is important. Be humble in that and trust God with that. And trust that God is going to provide for you and be grateful for whatever provision He provides, and don't fall into complaining about what He doesn't provide or what you think He doesn't provide, right? So, a couple of last questions here. Do you view serving others as an act of worship? Why or why not? Do you view whatever job you're doing as service? Stepping on all kinds of toes. Mm-hmm. That's what we do here. Do you think that your job is service? Do you think of your job as serving God? Whatever your job is, whatever role God has put you in, do you think of it as serving God? And if you do or don't, do you think of service as worshiping God? How's that for some perspective? Right? If God calls you to it, you are serving Him by doing it. And service is absolutely an act of worship. So you get to worship God as you do what He has called you to do. Whatever, unflattering, seemingly just unappealing job it is, role it is, task it is that He calls you to. He wants you to trust Him. He wants you to worship Him and have a heart of service for whatever it is that He called you to. I tried to do all unto God, but it gets tough because doing laundry or dishes, hard to keep that link up in my mind. Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's a really good point too, that even if your job is taking care of the house, right? That's along with this, that's what I do. And it's very important to remember that it is all for God too. You're taking care of your family, you're taking care of your home, you're taking care of everything, and you're making sure that your household is also honoring God in all different aspects, right? That's an act of service. That is absolutely an act of service. We're even supposed to worship in small things like eating food. Absolutely. Be grateful for whatever food God gives you, right? I spent a lot of years having pretty much nothing to eat, honestly. Growing up, we had, I mean, there was even some time where, I'll be real honest with you. Here's a little inside scoop to my childhood, bits of it. Um, Growing up, my older sister and I, we didn't always, my mom wasn't necessarily always paying attention and uh, doing what mothers should do. And we very often went without food to the point that we ended up, this is going to sound really weird, but we ate cat and dog food out of the bags in the kitchen instead of my mom actually providing food for us. Like there wasn't food in the kitchen. There were times later in my life where the kitchen was so bare when my stepmom would come to pick us up, she took pictures of the whole kitchen to show how empty it was, and then ended up going to the store and buying us a bunch of groceries and bringing it back to the house. And then called CPS on my mom. Like it was bad. You know what? Like I have a deep appreciation for food. I have a deep appreciation for food because for many, many, many years it was scarce. We didn't have much. And when we did have some food, it was not healthy food, but I appreciated it because it was food. For a while when I was a teenager, the main thing that I would eat because it was so cheap, I would eat Vienna sausages because they were like 29 cents a can, and pudding cups. You could get a pack of them for like less than $2. We would scrounge, my sister and I. We would scrounge and find change all over the house wherever we could find it, and we would run down to the store and pick up whatever we could get for those couple of dollars that we managed to scrounge up. And it was always just weird odds and ends of super super cheap stuff. But you know what? I appreciated it because it was food, right? So whatever it is, no matter how small it seems, no matter how much it's like, oh well, of course I need this. Of course I'm gonna have food. Well, not of course, because God's gonna provide for you, but you need to be grateful for what you do have. Be grateful that God gave you the food that you have. Be grateful that God gave you the home that you have, whatever condition it is in, whatever size it is, however fancy or non fancy it is, right? No matter what you have, be grateful that God gave you that because He doesn't have to, but He provides what we need. And so often, especially when we are faithful to Him, He will provide and bless in abundance. Be grateful for the little things as well as the big things and everything in between. And don't complain about what God provides for you because He does not have to, but He does because He loves us and He chooses to provide for us and He promises to provide for us. And we need to trust Him in that and trust that when we feel like, oh, this is not glamorous, this is not what I should be doing, I'm too good for this, dude, no, don't have that attitude. Be grateful that God gave you a way to serve, a way to serve Him with gratitude for everything that He's doing for you. Because He's working for you every single day, whether you see it or not. So have that heart check, have that humility check, and make sure that you have a heart of service for Him in whatever mundane thing it is that He's calling you to do, right? Um, catch up here. I'm always saying thanks to Jesus for the food that is all around my house that I have the privilege to say I'm not hungry for right now. Yep, absolutely. APK, hello, hello. That is heartbreaking to hear, but a good reminder of being grateful in all circumstances. Yeah, and I don't say it as like a sob story. I'm just, you know, I, I have some some deep reasons to be super grateful, but that's a good reminder. If you don't have those kind of deep reasons to be grateful, you really just need those heart checks. Like all of us need that heart check. I still need that heart check, but man, you know, make sure that you appreciate what God does do for you and what God gives to you and remember that He will provide what He knows you need. If you don't have it, you don't need it. And that's a really tough thing to swallow. If He doesn't provide it, you do not need it. You know? And that's tough. We have a hard time with that. I say we have a hard time with that. Trust God. Don't complain. And if you do complain, have a heart for change. Have a heart to make it better. Don't complain just to complain. And don't be caught up complaining about other people, right? Hello. Hello, hello. Samo Savage, nice to see you. Okay, so one of the ways we worship God is by serving Him. What steps might you take this week to make worship a more integral part of your life? What are some things that y'all can do, that we all can do this week to make worship through service a more important, a bigger part of our lifestyle? I mean, it just seems pretty good. Yes. Almost missed you there. Almost missed you. So, what are some things we can do, guys? Maybe pray more. If you catch yourself complaining, ooh, give it to God. Let's be honest, we're all guilty of that one at some point or another, right? You catch yourself complaining, stop. Give it to God. If you catch your loved ones complaining, lovingly remind them. Give that to God. Give that to God, right? And remind yourself to be grateful. Prayer is vital. Spending time in His Word is vital, right? Exactly, exactly. Find a peaceful place, clear the distractions, to pray with a Bible, scripture, to meditate on. Absolutely. Absolutely. Prayer and His Word. That's, I mean, above all, prayer and His Word. Immediately go to Him in the ways that we know we're supposed to and we can, right? Prayer and His Word. Absolutely. What is one way you could make yourself uncomfortable in order to serve someone in need this week? I'm trying to remember narrate my prayer life to my kids out loud. Yeah, dude, that's made a big difference for me with my kid. As I've been doing this more and I've been more like praying out loud more and everything, I've noticed that she's kind of started doing her own little Bible studies and is being prompted by that. And she's been kind of opening up her prayers a little bit more too. Sometimes it goes beyond the just generic, kid prayer of just, oh, let's just do this so my parents don't yell at me. She's actually started to throw some personal stuff in there. Not always, but it's getting there. Remember that can have a great effect on others. Absolutely. Absolutely. Service to others. I have to be at a women's conference this week, masked up and all, so probably somewhere in there. Yeah, absolutely. Please be safe. Please be safe. Um, so what are some ways that we can get uncomfortable in order to serve someone in need this week? Where's an area that maybe you feel God's been telling you to get uncomfortable and serve? Is there something that you've been kind of like, nope, I'm not gonna do that. That's too uncomfortable. I'd start there. I would start there. And what are some of the things, and feel free to keep chiming in, just going through what our last closing questions are. What are some of the things our church is already doing or our community is already doing to minister to people in need? And how can you get involved? What are we as a community doing to minister to people in need, right? We've got so many different areas. So many different areas. What's your local church doing, right? Is there an area in your local church or in our community or in another community that you're a part of that you could get involved, that you can serve, right? Your service in terms of finances? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Whatever it is that God's putting on your heart to do, step out in faith and do it, right? Whatever that is. We always give to the community from our church pantry and money and such. We always give to the causes. Good. And that's good. Absolutely. That's wonderful. And just remember that there's going to be different areas that God's going to call us to step outside our comfort zone, step outside the normal, and do something different to serve Him and to serve His people, right? To serve Him through serving His people and His church, right? So if God's calling you to serve in some way or another, if God is kind of giving you the hint, hint, nudge, nudge, and you're looking for an opportunity to serve and you're not sure where, look at your local church. We have opportunities in our community. There's plenty of other communities if you're a part of that I'm sure have opportunities to serve. Um, give it to God, lift it to God, ask Him where He wants you to go, what He wants you to do, and be obedient in that without being afraid of it, right? Volunteer with a Christ-centered dance ministry. Oh, that's cool. And the Lord has blessed us with a studio space after squatting in church basements for years. We are our own janitorial staff, so I think doing things without being asked could be helpful, not to mention tithing to help with the scholarship fund to no one is so no one is turned away. Absolutely. That's awesome. That is super super cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's a very creative way, right? That's a couple of very creative things to look at. And recognizing that God provided that. God made that possible for you guys to have that space, right? That's so cool. And there's always more that can be done. So if you are comfortable in where you are serving, how you are serving, I will just leave you with this. We'll challenge you to get uncomfortable, to find where God is telling you to branch out further, to change up what you're doing maybe. Whatever God is telling you to do, be bold and do it. Be obedient and do it. And don't complain about what God calls you to do. Don't complain about where God places you. Be humble and trust God, right? So here's kind of a prayer to leave you with. This week, or today, thank God for blessing us even though we don't deserve it. Ask Him to help us find joy in both sharing and showing the love of Christ to others. Pray that God would make us uncomfortable so that our perspective might change and we might be used by God to point others to Christ. Give it to God. Oh, excuse me. And through us getting uncomfortable, we will not only grow, but we will help others grow. And that is incredible. Okay? I think we'll close in prayer. And then we're going to find somebody to raid today. Feel free to keep chiming in, throw in your input, all that good stuff. We're going to pray, and then we'll find somebody to raid today, okay? Dear Lord, thank you so much, God, that you provide for us more than we need. But when you provide for us, God, you give us more than we ever recognize. You do for us more than we ever acknowledge. And God, I just thank you wholeheartedly for every single bit of it. I thank you that you're working for us. I thank you that you are in our hearts. You are guiding us. Your spirit is with us. That we have a relationship with you. And those who don't, they have the opportunity to come into a relationship with you and be blessed by you. And Lord, I just thank you so much for that. And God, I know that we don't deserve it. We couldn't earn any of it, but God, you give it to us anyway, and man, I just thank you so humbly for that. God, help us to appreciate what we have. Help us to share your love and your blessings with others. Help us to be generous in serving your people and serving you and worshiping you through that service, God. And just help us to have that heart for service. Help us to not see getting uncomfortable as a bad thing, but see that as an opportunity to grow, to learn, to expand, to do more for you, and to lead more people to you. God, help us to be humble. Help us to not complain about people about your calling for us, but help us to, when we are uncomfortable, just lift it up to you and help us to see the blessing in it. God, thank you so much that you call each of us to do the roles that we're called to, that we each have something unique to bring to your kingdom. We each have something unique to contribute. And I thank you so much for that. And I just pray that all of us have a heart to see that and appreciate it as well. God, thank you so much for this lesson today. Thank you so much for everybody who came in today and participated in this study. And I thank you for what's ahead this week as we continue to go through all the different lessons that we get to take out of the story. And Lord, I thank you for the study that we've had in this entire Fearless and Faithful series. It's just been incredible, and I just appreciate all the lessons that we've been able to take out. God, thank you so much for all the blessings you provide. In your name, amen.